Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to another BitMine video. We are back to the original format because the new format didn't really work out that well. And I kind of just simply miss talking about stocks in a non sort of scripted way, right? So let's start off the video with BitMine's consolidation period. It is currently about 325 days since BitMine started their strategy and since Tom Lee got involved. And I think a lot of people that have bought since almost the start of this run, I bought it at kind of a bad time. I bought it at around August of 2025, and ever since, my portfolio has done so badly that I just had to start a new portfolio. And that was probably my fault. I shouldn't have bought Bitmine at a 1.5 MNF, but that was also when everyone, including Tom Lee, was the most excited about it. So, my average price about 60. And yeah, it's a very, very hard stock to hold. In fact, it's so hard to hold that I don't even know if it will even do well in the future. But just going to zooming in a little bit more on the technical picture, especially the most recent one. um what's the most damning here is that Bitmine is sort of breaking this consolidation trend line that was actually moving upwards. Now there are a couple of reasons for this. The Clarity Act passing, well, it's not fully signed. It's passed, but it's not signed. The Clarity Act passing actually had a negative effect on Bitcoin. Um, and then the market is still really uncertain about oil. What the narrative is saying right now is that Bitcoin and Ethereum might have sort of an inverse correlation with oil. So you can see that oil prices are still moving towards the upside, and Bitcoin is continuing to go down. Um, so what we are currently looking at, or what I'm currently looking at, is this triple bottom right now as a support level. So this will be around $17, and then I had a thesis for Bitcoin to go back to 1550. If you look back on my channel, I believe I unprivated that video. So if we break below this 1780 level, then we are heading back to around 15. And what I'm personally doing is I'm still continuing to buy, but at like a very, very small amount. Okay, I'm buying Bitcoin at basically at $100 at a time, and I'm not putting any more money um, because I don't know how long this consolidation will take. It honestly might take another 200 days. I think it's very possible for us to be in a downtrend for crypto all the way until at least October of 2026. And I can't really see anything beyond that. We could, if the Fed doesn't cut, then we might even stay or even go down after October. The main reason I think why Ethereum is not being bought up right now is because we all know Ethereum has that native staking yield, but the staking yield is about 3%. Okay, and if you go to any let's go to SGOF, right? SGOF is your 0 to 3 month treasury bond, gives you like a 4%. Okay, so the only way people will pick Ethereum over just keeping it in cash or in 0 to 3 month treasuries is if Ethereum's native staking yield goes above that, which you would have to have the 0 to 3 month treasury bond yield to go down. um so yeah, typically when that goes down, it's already like you already have an inverse correlation. So when yields go down, stocks are supposed to go back up. And maybe When that happens this time, we might have like a double, bull case because the yield goes down and Ethereum staking yield goes above the SGOV. But that's very hard to foresee right now because inflation is still pretty high. We might even have rate hikes on the table. So it's very possible that Ethereum might even go back down to like below 1800, and yeah, we might even go back down to like 1500 if that happens, if we get rate hikes. And you know yeah, so we'll go through the comparison between Bitmine and a few other stocks that I just want to point this out, okay? Bitmine is doing so bad right now that it's not even beating MicroStrategy. And part of the reason why I bought Bitmine was because I thought that Bitmine would have a less volatile um, stock price, but that was not the case. Now, I think it's uh, warranted for what Bitmine is sort of currently doing. They are just purely um, the strategy to dilute their share price, not below 1 MNF. Um, but that dilution, still clearly comes at a cost. And I think that the strategy behind Bitmine is still less risky than MicroStrategy. So the thesis is not broken for me, but it's there's a difference between my thesis and sort of what I expected in terms of the stock price, right? And then it's also not beating the S&P 500, which I can give it what would you call it, like a leeway, because Bitmine is meant to be like a longer term strategy. So I would like more time before I compare between Bitmine and S&P. But just as a proof of concept, the past 6 months, Bitmine has done very, very badly. And then it's also not even outperforming Ethereum. Okay. So once again, the reason is most likely because they dilute their stock price. But the matter of fact is that it's literally the worst performing um, stock if you compare it to everything else that makes sense to compare it to. Um, so there's that. Okay. Now there are a couple of bullish theses for Bitmine. So I'm still very bullish. I'm just pointing out the fact that Bitmine is likely the worst stock you could have picked over the past 6 months, and despite me having 100% of Bitmine in one of my portfolios, I'm not holding that back. Okay, I'm just saying the truth here. So just some bullish cases. There are a lot of institutions that still continue to buy up Bitmine and Ethereum. So you can see here, Citigroup, BNY, BlackRock, and Morgan Stanley are buying up Bitmine now. I think part of this is misleading because you see like 542% up, but you don't really he doesn't really show you how many shares they bought. They might have had only like 1,000 shares and then they bought like another 5,000, right? So yes, institutions are buying, but I would suspect it's not that much. Vanguard has like 4.7 million shares, um, and ARK has 9.7 million shares. Okay. Oh yeah, you can do the math here. Vanguard literally only has like 100 million. So if you sort of consider how much asset under management Vanguard really has, this is basically like a rounding error, right? So not, it's great news, but just it's not, I would say, like news that would push Bitcoin up 5%, even that. Um, Bitmain currently owns 4.37% of Ethereum. Now, that's a pretty spectacular goal. I'm actually pretty happy that, on one hand, Ethereum is so low, that Bitmine doesn't have to raise so much money to get 5%. We could hit 5%. And my thesis for Bitmine is that once we hit 5%, it's mostly all profit from there, because the staking yield can either be used to buy back stock, which is what I would prefer, or it can be used as a dividend. So people that have a lot of BMNR stock might get a lot of money back. For example, I have like 1,700 shares of Bitmine in one of my portfolios, and if Bitmine gave like a 1% dividend, that would be am I getting the math correctly? That would be like, even if it stays at this price, right? $3,000, $3,300 if he gives out a 1% dividend. Um, so I really want Bitmine to get like 5%, and in my theory, which could be wrong because I've been wrong on Bitmine for the last 6 months. Um, After Bitmine achieves 5%, it's all profit from there. So this is a pretty spectacular thing, and I hope they get there as soon as possible so that investors can get as much money back as soon as possible. Next up, we have the Bank of England, FCA, set out shared vision for tokenization. So another sort of bull case for Ethereum specifically is their total value locked. So if you go to ETH Val, and if you go to their TVL multiple, you can see that based on their total value locked, which is basically, this is what will increase if tokenization succeeds and grows. The amount of assets that are tokenized on Ethereum grows. This multiple will theoretically increase, and you can see that the current fair value based on this multiple is 2,600, compared to the ETH price of like 2,100 right now. We are technically undervalued, but I will take this with a grain of salt. But if this increases by, let's say, 100%, that would put ETH at around like 5,000 for specifically this multiple. And that would be like more than a double here, right? And the question now is sort of how long this will necessarily take. I think if tokenization is really such a good driver of efficiency, it won't take long at all. But we also have to keep in mind that Ethereum is competing with a lot of other cryptos that do very very different things, and especially do things more efficiently than Ethereum in some cases, right? Solana and XRP has their own sort of use cases compared to Ethereum, and I would argue that Solana and XRP most likely are more susceptible to change, so it's easier for them to change and pivot compared to Ethereum, because Ethereum is such a big um, crypto. But at the same time, Ethereum is still one of the only cryptos that hasn't had any downtime, which is very special. Now hopefully that continues, and hopefully Ethereum doesn't have downtime. So that's it for today's BMNR video. Once again, a very very hard stock to hold. But I am still holding, and I am still averaging down despite all the terrible bad news that I've spoken on BMNR. I'm just saying the truth. So thank you guys for watching. Like, subscribe. See you next one.